Liz Allen has devoted almost a decade of her young life to public service. Most of those years, she has worked in the lofty offices of the Vice President and the President of the United States. Yet, her professional responsibilities have not settled Liz with a sense of elite status. Rather, this wise woman realizes the true purpose of government is to serve the people. And that, she notes, is an honor of which she never loses sight.
My first job, actually, I got a job in the administration working at the Department of Homeland Security, a political appointment position to be an assistant, based on some of my prior experience at the State Department working on these human smuggling and human trafficking issues.
Were you disappointed that it was that?
No, I was actually quite excited. I very much sort of was aware of what I thought my place in the pecking order was, given that, I was not one of the earliest employees on President Obama's campaign. I had done the convention, which in many ways was not viewed as the Obama campaign until he was the nominee, obviously.
Right.
But there were many more people in line ahead of me, sort of is how I understood it, and rightfully so, to get jobs in the White House or anywhere else.
And how long do you stay in that job?
Well, I was in that job for 3 weeks when the Vice President's office called to come over for an interview.
Now, had you worked with the Vice President?
I had done one advance trip for the Vice President. An advance trip is when they send a team of people to go ahead and help plan his travel and set up the logistics for he or any other principal that are then going to come in and execute the trip. So I had done one of those trips when the administration was just getting up and running, and they needed people to go out on the road, as they say. And so I did that once or twice, did what that we call press advance, to work with the press to set up the coverage for a visit. And so a few months later, when the Vice President's office was hiring a press assistant, they remembered some people from the road, and I was asked to interview along with others, and got the job.
How long in total did you stay with the Vice President?
For 5 years. I was working directly with him. I was part of his press office for all of those 5 years. I entered as his press assistant, and when I left, I was the deputy communications director for him. And I traveled a lot with him. That was part of my job, and how my job evolved was to do most of his international travel and much of his domestic travel.
If you had to use one word to describe the Vice President, what would that be?
Honorable. I think I learned more from him in hindsight once I left, or I realized how much I learned from him in hindsight once I left. He and the Biden family were relatable, and in my case, he being from Scranton, me being from Buffalo, those are similar towns. We talked about how similar those towns were in terms of blue-collar roots and the importance of family and the importance of neighbors. He and Dr. Joe Biden were also military parents, as were my parents, and we were a military family. When my brother deployed for the first time, Dr. Biden wrote my mom a note and included the prayer that she used when Bo was deployed. And so there were some very deeply meaningful connections while I was an employee. But it wasn't until I left that I realized how ingrained one of his life philosophies was in me, and that is that his mother used to tell him, no one is better than you, and you are not better than anyone. So it's like another way of saying, you are everyone's equal, and everyone is equal to you. And he was constantly telling us that, and constantly sort of weaving that philosophy into his speeches or his writings or his approach to things. And that is similar to a philosophy that I feel like I was taught growing up, but was never fully realized until I worked for him and then left.
You said you ended up as his deputy communications director. Define what that means, because a lot of people have no idea.
In my case for him, and partly in my case now, working with the same title but for the president, that is a combination of long-term strategic planning from a communications perspective and what messages we want to relay, how to relay those messages, what kind of communications tactics are we going to use, when should we do speeches, when should we do interviews, where should we do those, what makes sense. One of my particular focuses in both places has been travel, events, trips, and figuring out how to execute those in a way that are consistent with both our operational realities and our communications goals.
And what about the immediate, when something happens and you have to give them the statement? Is that in your realm as well?
Yes, that's been a team effort, and it's a little bit different on the Vice President and the President's side. Certainly releasing statements in response to an event or a death was definitely something I did a lot with the Vice President's office. In the case of the President, whether he goes out and gives a statement on something or how we're going to respond to something, if it's in person or if it's through social media, I'm involved with a team of my colleagues in making those decisions. I worked on the re-election in 2012, yes, but on the official side of the White House. So I stayed at the White House, as a government employee. I had other colleagues who went to Chicago to work on the political side. But being that the president and the vice president were incumbents running, there was still a whole set of responsibilities and infrastructure that required the official work around him. So I did travel quite a bit on the campaign trail in 2012, especially with the press and designing the coverage. So we spent a lot of nights in Iowa and Wisconsin. I have fond memories of cheese curds and custard and all those things. You know, the campaign trail is like nowhere else, especially when you have a chance to see it up close with someone like the president or the vice president. Because I felt, and I know the vice president felt this way, that it's a privilege to meet the American people in that way. Those people are giving up their day to come see you speak because they want to feel something. And that's what it's about. And not only is it them feeling something, but it's us listening. The two-way understanding that they want to hear something from their elected leaders, but they also want their elected leaders to hear them. And that's something that we always very much kept in mind in my experience.
The campaign finishes, the Obama-Biden ticket is reelected, and you remain with the vice president for another year.
Yes.
What are the circumstances that take you away from that job?
I left because after almost 5 years at the White House, you feel like you want a new challenge. I mean, the White House is not somewhere that most people stay for longer than a few years at a time.
Because of the intensity of it?
That is certainly part of it. A little bit of your work-life balance is probably part of it for most people. It was for me. And frankly, also just looking for a new professional challenge. I think the White House is a place where there is a very singular sense of purpose and fulfillment based on your service to this president and this vice president. But there are other ways to feel fulfilled in a job. And after so long in a place, you start to look for more creative opportunities for yourself. If you feel like there's other places for advancement, then, you know, a lot of us sought those out. So I went to the State Department. I knew I wanted to stay in the family. And by in the family, I mean working for the administration. It still meant something to me to work for this president and this vice president. In this case, I just moved over to an agency that I had been familiar with, which helped a lot, to sort of pivot back to working on programs and policies in the international space.
And how long were you there?
I was there for about 13 months and then got a call to come back to the White House very unexpectedly. I was at urgent care that day because I had the flu. And I got an email from an old colleague of mine while I was sitting at urgent care and said, "Hey, are you around later tonight to chat about something?" And in my mind, having heard from this person, I had a little bit of a gut reaction that it might be about a job. So we spoke that evening and she said, "You know, we have this job likely opening up and we're talking to a few people and your name came up and would you even be interested? I just want to gauge your reaction." And the job was to come back and work in the White House Communications Office as the Director of Message Planning.
Was there any part of you that just went, working for the President of the United States?
Yes, of course. I feel that way every day. I drive into work and they open the gates and I feel every time they open the gates, I think, God, I can't believe I'm driving through the gates to come to work at the White House. I do. It doesn't leave you. I think that's important too. I think you have to have a sense of your place in history here and you can't take it for granted. We've certainly tried not to.